Yeah, I think we have a quorum. So we'll go ahead and do the Pledge of Allegiance first.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. If we can just do a verbal roll call. Paul Charnetsky.
Dave Romack.
Ann Claire.
Sonny Culbert. Will Felice.
Martin Hitchcock.
Susan Fix.
Suzanne Allen.
Michael Faith. Chuck Emmert.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting?
Motion to approve minutes from last meeting.
Seconded.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. So I just want to update the group a little bit. I did mention a few things. I talked about the roll call, and if you're a few minutes late, that's okay. We won't call you out. We did have an executive meeting. Suzanne, the city attorney, and got some information from the city on a couple of items, just on some clarification on some things that we talked about last time. Suzanne has some great additions and also some additions or editing from some of the articles that we talked about that we're going to propose, and I think they'll blend in nicely. I think she has something about the some of the discussions we had about water and where it might fit in, and also some of the upcoming stuff that we're going to be talking about in terms of ethics and some of the other sections. There's some areas that she's going to talk about today. And then just one other thing that I wanted to point out to the group, that first pass of that half was just a draft pass. That's not anything final. We're going to go through that again and vote again on that. I also want to point out that we did not have one member here of that group, and I apologize. I'm not. There was some. The group was divided, and it was really the first time we haven't been 100% on kind of what we want to do. The group was divided on two decisions. The vote was close. I think at some point we need to bring that up, and we're going to re-vote that. We're going to have some rediscussion on that, both of those issues in terms of the minimum age and also on term limits. And I want to have rediscussion on that, and we are going to do a roll call vote with everybody here present on that again. So at that point, I think what we'll do, we'll go ahead and start with Article 8 on contracts.
Article 7, ordinances and resolutions, I think is where we are.
Okay, 7, I'm sorry. Go ahead, thanks.
So we had gone, I'll start, Paul. We had gone through, I think, most of this article, and there were no questions really until we got to, I think it was Section 10, Section 11, Section 12, Section 13, and even 14, and we discussed possibly removing that. And then did the attorney have an opinion on that? Well, like if we were to remove it, would that have some ill effect?
You're on section 11? Removing sections 11, 12, 13.
14, yeah.
16.
And this is 11 through 15. If you're going to have provisions dealing with ordinances prior to that you should probably have the provisions that talk about how they're enacted, repealed, suspended. but it's totally up to the board if you want to just have the basics in there with regard to what actions are required by ordinance, how an ordinance, is required to be passed, and then, you know, the methods for amending, revising, and reenacting ordinances would essentially be the same method as adopting an ordinance. So you could easily get rid of section 11, section 12, and, you know, to repeal an ordinance or suspend an ordinance, you have to do it by ordinance. It's already a statutory requirement. There's already a statutory procedure for adoption by reference. So if those sections, if you want to streamline things and cut those sections out, I don't see any issues, any conflicts with the rest of it.
So if we were to take that out and then it goes back to you to edit, and you look at it and see that maybe it needs to go back in, and
If there's something detailed in there that ties into one of the other provisions, then we can call that out for you. But, you know, I don't see any reason why you would have to have those in there, because all of that is covered by state statute and how ordinances are passed and adopted. And it can be clarified in more detail in the city code. The one thing that you would think about here is that as a board of freeholders, you're establishing the charter, which is going to be a little more restrictive on how the city operates, how ordinances can be passed and adopted and stuff, as opposed to, you know, the standard process where the council adopts and passes ordinances in terms of city code. So that's the key thing to remember, is that ordinances, the city code is established by way of ordinance. So an ordinance is a very important legislative act. So if you want to have specific controls and specific requirements for those legislative acts in the charter, that's great. If you want to just identify and have it be more general, that's good as well.
Well, and I think, Ken, to your point earlier, you were very focused on the ordinance piece because you wanted to make sure that it was very clear how the council was going to be conducting things. So did you have any suggestions or thoughts about that?
So you were just talking about the bubble on section 11 that says we were considering removing sections 11 through 15, right?
That's
Yes.
right.
Okay. I thought everybody was pretty okay with that, so
Okay.
I don't have any comments on that. However, way back up in section 6, which is on page 14 in mine, it talks about some things that we talked about that I thought did need to be resolved. Proposing discussion on this item. Oh, it said borrowing money. So somebody said, why would we only list borrowing money there? Don't we need to add some things? And I think it says somewhere in one of these bubbles, like we said, taxing taxing is already covered. There was something else besides borrowing money, and I can't remember what I saw in these bubbles. But the issue that I had that I don't think is covered in a bubble is I had suggested that since we're allowing the council to set their own salary, since we're allowing the council to levy taxes and do all of those things by ordinance, we want to make absolutely certain that everybody has every chance, every opportunity possible to show up at those meetings. So during the first reading, you have listed what the date of the second meeting is, so that anybody who's at the first meeting, you have something in that agenda item that says, and the second hearing will appear on this date. Now, is that covered, or did I miss it?
If there's a specific provision that requires the second date to be on the.
Yes, yes.
I mean,
So I'm just throwing that, I personally like it. I've seen that in a lot of cities, and anybody who's there for the first hearing, the hearing didn't go their way, they want to get some people to come to the second hearing, they want to know when the hearing is. If they don't see that, and the next day, the clerk puts something online that says, oh, by the way, we're having the second hearing, 2 days from now, and good luck with that. They should be able to hear when the second hearing is. And then typically, When you're having the second hearing, you remind people, you say, and the first hearing on this item occurred on, and you put that date. So now everybody understands that there were two hearings, and what that does is it avoids people protesting later. Oh, I guess I didn't show up at that meeting, that's my fault. I, had 2 bites at the apple, I missed it, I'm not gonna go down there and argue with people. So I like that idea. I don't think it was covered here. What does anybody else think about those two issues? Is that, should that be?
It's procedural.
It is procedural.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
So we're clear, you keep referencing the hearing, but.
A public meeting, are you?
It's a discussion. It wouldn't be a quote-unquote legal hearing, because there's different requirements for a legal hearing with regard to publication, notifications, and stuff like that. So it would be an initial introduction and then an adoption,
yes.
is how the process goes.
Right.
And it is at a,
Well, people refer to that as 2 public hearings. Do we get 2 public hearings on that? But I
I don't
understand
know,
what you're
I
saying.
just want to make sure, because
Yeah.
you use the word hearing, and that has a legal definition and connotation as opposed to an introduction and adoption.
Yeah, however you want to do that. So what does anybody else think? Like I said, I'm willing to go along with letting the council have a lot of leeway to do stuff without having a public vote, as long as the public is invited to those meetings where they do those things and has clear vision of when those meetings occur, that's all.
I think the public's always invited to city council meetings.
Unless it's a closed meeting, right?
Well, no, it's
Special
required, you cannot pass an ordinance, you cannot adopt an ordinance in executive session. Executive session is the only time when the council can meet in a closed session that's not open to the public.
Right.
So the requirement is, right now, it's two readings. You have an introduction and you have an adoption.
Right.
There are some jurisdictions that have 1 reading on an ordinance. If you want to make it very clear in the charter that you require 2 readings of the ordinance, an introduction and adoption, I think that would be appropriate.
I think we talked about that as well.
And that's what would establish it, but, outside of that, you could, I don't know if you want to limit yourself and say that the second hearing has to be at the next regularly scheduled meeting, because things come up, meetings can get canceled, rescheduled, and you still have the issue of that by state statute, an ordinance can be adopted with 1 reading if it contains an emergency clause, if there's.
So the emergency clause we'll get to, but, okay, so I understand exactly what you're saying, and all I'm telling you is, I've seen the people who get up in arms about council action, and it happens when the council has the first hearing, and then they schedule a meeting in between their regular meetings to have a second hearing, and nobody knows about it, they don't show up, they say, oh my gosh, that was important, you just passed a levy, or increased our taxes, and I couldn't make it to the second hearing because I didn't have enough advance notice. You posted it 24 hours in advance on the website. I don't check the website every day. I'm just.
So you would like to just put on there, in the event that there's a bar, that both dates be posted at the first meeting?
That's what I like, but
I mean,
if that's
that's a
too
detail
detailed, if that's too detailed for the charter, tell me. It's a good practice. If it's too detailed for the charter.
No, I don't think it's too detailed for the charter. It's just coming up with the right wording so that, because as an attorney, I'm trying to anticipate and trying to think of what could happen in the future if we, for example, if we're adopting a budget or certain things that have to be adopted by ordinance and by state statute, you have a specific time frame, and you can do the first introduction at a regular meeting, but the second one is always done at a special meeting, or even required by statute to be done at a special meeting.
Right.
How we word that, if we word it to where the introduction of the ordinance will also provide for the date of the adoption date of the ordinance.
That's all I.
That's the perfect, right there.
So that language sounds really good to me and avoids all of the things that you're talking about previously, which is, sometimes things just happen. You have to schedule a meeting and you have to do it right away, and that's when the public gets upset.
That covers those two bubbles there.
So thank you for that, and then.
Hold on, before we move on, Ken.
Yeah.
What happens when the second meeting gets canceled due to unforeseen circumstance? So you have to have some sort of clause in there that provides a mechanism for rescheduling the second adoption meeting. So if you published it in the first one, and the charter says you have to publish it, and, somebody has a heart attack, and so we cancel the second meeting, when is the second meeting?
Yeah, however you word that, it's typically, if that meeting gets moved, then, you have to publicize that anyway. So if you were looking for that meeting, I'm gonna go to that meeting and get that second reading, then you see that the meeting was canceled, and you see when it was rescheduled.
Okay, so that's already in there? or that would be.
I think they can cover that in language, pretty clear.
Okay. Well, so we'll have you gotta put something together on that, and then we'll be go.
And maybe, Joe, under B, where you already addressed, all ordinances shall have two separate readings at two separate council meetings, maybe the wording could be fitted into that sentence. And we'll be, in section 6B, for us, it's page.
And then you brought up emergencies, and I'm looking at section 7 now, where the bubble says,
So, Kenny, hold on one second. So in section 5, we're finished the one bubble that we talked about as far as putting the 2 open meeting laws, clarifying that. Then we came down where Sonny talked about section 6 and that clause there. Sonny, what were you suggesting on that?
No, I just said it's a place where our city attorney can put the wording that Kenny was looking for was in that sentence on B, where it says all ordinance shall have two separate readings at two separate council meetings. He could
Initial
put the,
meeting will.
right, he could put the wording there.
Okay. All right, so then we'll move through that one there, Kenny, and then what was the next area that you're talking, now we're moving through, and then you talked about eliminating some areas, Suzanne?
I think Ken has more
on section 7, there's a bubble
Okay.
that said we will discuss this, right? So
Okay.
should other topics be including, and zoning was one of those things. So it says emergency measures and things, no emergency, the last sentence in section 7. No emergency resolutions or ordinance shall be allowed regarding franchises, increasing of levy and taxes, and we also talked about zoning. And everybody agreed, zoning is almost never an emergency. You never say, hey, we need to emergency zone this residential property commercial. That has to, without 2 hearings. I would hate to ever see zoning occur with 1 hearing. And I think we talked about that, and everybody was like, yeah,
Yes.
that never happens, right? So,
Well,
but if we put 1 or 2 things in there, are we limiting? Is that the only 2 things? 3 things, franchises, levying taxes, and changing of zoning. Are those the only 3 things that can't occur by emergency then, if that's what we put in there?
Well, there are also, in addition to that, there's statutory
Okay.
limitations on what constitutes an emergency.
Okay. So I'm just following up. The bubble says zoning was suggested. So I think that means we were going to come back and talk about that. That's all.
Do we then, are you suggesting we put it, and zoning changes?
Is zoning
I think-
allowed to
I
be
think-
changed by 1 hearing in emergency ordinance by statute? Would changing of zoning within the city?
Off the top, I can't anticipate, I haven't seen a circumstance in my experience where there's been an emergency that would require,
Okay.
that would be for.
But we don't know whether statute.
Mr. City Manager, have you seen that before? No.
Right. So it won't hurt to put it in there. Zoning,
Are you thinking like a change to the general amendment plan? Is that?
no. I'm talking about just a change to zoning. So the property next door to you is currently residential, and they want to make that commercial and open a Pizza Hut. And you say, I think that should have 2 hearings, right? I mean, this is never going to happen, right? But people are concerned about zoning, they're concerned about taxes and those things. So I just thought we should put something in there that says it will never be done by emergency.
Kenny,
I just want to make it clear, an emergency clause in the ordinance makes it effective immediately. Normally, it's, once it's adopted, it doesn't take effect for 30 days after adoption.
Doesn't it also only require 1 hearing?
Yeah.
I think it does.
And yes,
Okay, that's what we're trying to avoid.
yes.
No emergency for the things listed here and zoning changes.
you're saying you want it to have 2 hearings?
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
That's
Well,
something
that's what,
not an
that's what
emergency.
he's saying, and he's
Yeah,
saying
but that doesn't
that,
really apply, that's not an emergency.
But that's what she's saying, an emergency only takes 1.
right.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's start over.
Okay.
Right now, ordinances require 2 hearings. This says you can have an emergency where it only has 1 hearing and takes effect immediately. And however, you can't have an emergency for regarding franchising, licensing, or levying of taxes. And all we're talking about is, do you want to add to that list or changes to zoning? That's all.
Yeah,
I don't have any issue.
yeah, that's okay.
Makes sense.
You got that, Joe? Is that? Okay. All right, so we'll move through that, section 8, and then Suzanne, you're,
Yeah, I skipped ahead, everyone, I'm sorry. And also,
the 11 through
did
15.
you want to just mention that Paige is not going to be here tonight to provide tax guidance or anything like that? the financial.
I didn't know that she was.
Yeah, our city manager, she's out sick. So if you guys wanna pull that off to the
Yeah.
next meeting.
We will have the financial policy changes you requested before the Tuesday meeting. Sorry she couldn't be here.
Regarding the, bonds and debt limitations
Yeah.
and the other one that I can't think of right
Yes,
now.
ma'am, that's it.
Thank you.
Are we waiting for language from her, or did we agree that?
You had requested wording from her at the last meeting, sir, that the group had, and we would have had that text today that she said.
Okay.
So we'll have it before
I-
the Tuesday meeting.
So, I may be, I thought what we said was, we were gonna put text in here that said, debt policies shall be approved by ordinance by the city council, and she was just gonna draft that to take to the city council. Is that not what we said? Or did we say she was gonna bring language back for us here for
That
that?
was my understanding she was bringing you guys.
Okay. So 11 through 15, are you satisfied, Suzanne? You said, you brought this up, and everybody kind of said, we don't need 11 through 15, are we all?
Then you,
good on
Joe, said we could take that out, and then if you thought you needed to do something, we were
Yeah,
good.
I've got
So we're
your-
good through that.
Remove sections 11 through 15 and verify no conflicts with the review.
So that, and that page 17, there were no other discussions through that section 16, and then moving into section 8, or Article 8, sitting any contracts on 17. We had been through that. Now, I do, Marty and Fraser, I don't believe you were at that meeting. Will was on, he was on, Zoom. So this last section here, I don't know that you guys were there.
Right, but
So if
I've
there-
followed along on
Yeah, I know.
the
So if there's something here, you guys, that didn't get tagged, if you're welcome to speak up. anytime. So we're in Article 8, Section 1 through and 3, going all the way into Section 5.
I think section 5 just kind of mentioned something they already took out.
This board not interested in lesser penalties.
Yeah.
If it's fraud or collusion, we talked about that, but there's not much, anything we can really do.
Right. I think there was language in there they just took out, we weren't interested in
Okay.
including.
That's correct.
So we're good on that.
Just out of curiosity, so, section 3, the city at its discretion may reject any and all bids. One of the things that I've seen in other areas is, or other cities, is bids can languish, you know, they're not responded to. You have developers making offers for various things, you have, you know, stuff going on, and they just sit. And so I kind of would like to see a deadline if possible. The city must respond 6 months after a bid is received. I don't know what the legal is here, I don't know what the standard is. I just know that I've seen in other cities, and I've heard from developers that bids just languish.
So are you talking about unsolicited bids? Like somebody just comes up and says, hey, is the city interested in this? Or are you talking about solicited bids?
Solicited bids.
Okay.
So these are that the city is asked for bids.
Bids or proposals, so everything that I've seen that's formal, that is solicited, is a request for proposals, and it lists an opening date. The bids will be opened on this date. And if you're, and that's pretty standard. So if you're saying they open on that date, and there's not specific language of, and the award will be granted, is that what we're talking about?
Maybe I'm talking about unsolicited bids, and I'm, you know, hearing from, and this is probably, you know, a game of telephone, that I'm not fully understanding what a developer is saying.
Okay.
But maybe it's an unsolicited bid, contact to a city, we're interested in this, and then they don't hear anything.
Yeah.
And it's repeated contact of,
Right.
hey, we're trying this, and there's no response.
But that would be like a guy trying to sell you something.
So,
Yeah, I mean, that's,
don't wanna-
we
don't
would
wanna
put language
answer.
in here that helps the contractor versus.
so RFPs, Mr. Manager,
Yeah.
RFPs, or requests for proposals, always state the opening date, and you open them on that date, and there's some date after which you have to get back to people who supplied offers, correct?
Right, and they also have the right to attend opening of the bid as well.
Do we, can we,
Oh, yeah.
That's all.
do you,
Yes, yes.
do you respond to all the people that put in, like, when you put a bid
out.
proposal, and they come back to you, do you respond to them yea or nay, or you don't, there's just no response if you're not interested?
We generally let them know what the other bids were. Sometimes we'll tell them which bid was selected.
And they almost always want to know what the winning bid was.
So we need to
How
put,
much
do we
time
need
does
to
it buy?
put
So
something like that
now-
in
The
there?
winning bid is always posted.
Yeah.
But is that, so is that something that's put in your policy? That's what you see? Yeah, so that's kind of already in there, yeah.
Unsolicited, somebody just contacts you and says, hey, I see a big vacant space downtown, I'd propose we build a hotel there. I would hate to say that the city has to get back to them by.
It's already, it sounds like it's already in their policies right now.
We go the round side.
The sign on the front door.
Yeah, so that's a really good point, but I gotta say, I side with the city. It's like people calling you on your phone saying, hey, would you like to sell your house? I'm never getting back to that person. Ever.
But you could just say no, so that, you know,
Sure.
what I hear is,
They want you to say no, you don't want to answer.
yeah, if people do not say no,
Right.
and, you know, whether it's, you know, surprise, other cities.
So we'll go,
Maybe one of the issues that you may have heard from is, there can be a lag between bid opening and bid award.
Sure.
Because during that time period, although, you know, you go through there, then the selection committee goes and reviews the bids, makes their recommendation, and it's the lowest, most responsive bidder. It's not always the lowest bid. So when you get to that process, and then you go through a process of, sometimes there's a two-step process, where then you have the council designate the lowest, most responsive bid and direct staff to negotiate a contract. And then you go back, and then you have contract negotiations, even though you typically have your draft contract in your RFP or RFQ document, there's still negotiation periods between there where you come to an agreement, and then that contract goes to the council for the actual award. So there could be a period of a couple months between actual bid opening and the award. But typically, it's no longer than typically 90 days, because that is a time period where your typical bid bond is valid. Most large projects require a bid bond, which is 10% of the bidders.
do we need to have something like this in the charter, other than what we have right now?
No,
Okay, yeah.
those are typically
All
addressed
right,
through.
so we'll go through that.
And through the RFP itself, because you want to have flexibility with being able to establish your rules and procedures for each RFP or RFQ.
Right. Is there anything else on Article 8 we wanted to go about? We actually started that meeting last time because the finance wasn't there. So we did go with ethics that day, and then she showed up, we got caught up. And the first thing that came up was, Kenny, you brought up the whole thing about the wording in terms of the race and color, religion, all that. Now, with that, you can't have that wording.
What section are you on?
Ethics, Article 9.
Article 9.
Section 1. Article 9. We're going,
Right here.
Oh,
Section 1.
Okay.
well, this isn't finance, though. It's
no, we're not doing finance right now.
You're talking about
Yeah.
ethics? All I said about this section was, it's limited. It doesn't, originally, it didn't address sexual orientation or age. They've made some recommendations here to say you can either use language which is from two different sources, Department of Economic Security, and there's another one. And I will go with whatever the city attorney wants. I would prefer that, I think, unless you make a really good argument otherwise, that we just reference those things and say that we shall not discriminate based on any protected class, and then list the sources where those protected classes might be, so that if they change from time to time, we don't have to update the charter.
Yes, I would
We
agree.
can have a broad definition
Yeah.
of no person shall be appointed to remove permanent discriminating teams with respect to any city position because of any federally or state protected class.
Yes.
Yeah.
Understanding that there are municipalities that broaden that to include LGBTQ issues.
Right,
Things like that, because those are not protected classes.
right. And they're ever changing. And when you put that in a charter, you're gonna have an election every other year
Yeah.
to try to update the charter. And
Well, I mean, and also per federal Civil Rights Act, race, color, religion, sex, national origin, is that not, isn't LGBTQ under that?
I don't think it's correct.
Not yet.
But, so that's why we
It
were
will be.
proposing to just leave it
Sure.
to what
References to the
references to the
state and federal regulations.
And then when they change, it goes along with it.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
Unless people in the group, so I can speak up now, If you want to be more restrictive than that, because the city attorney said, other cities list other things and say you shall also be protected from discrimination based on this or this that are not in federal and state statutes. I don't have any off the top of my head.
What do you think of that, Ray? What do you think about what he's talking about there? Do you,
I think, I think we should not be more restrictive. I mean, I can't imagine what we would add that's not already there.
Sexual orientation is not in either one, I don't think.
but I don't believe
That's what cities will add.
Did the wording in the bubble, was that provided by our attorneys after we?
Yes,
Talk
that
about
one,
it?
yes,
Okay.
that's what they brought back to us as one option of how we could word that.
Right.
So if the state adds sexual orientation,
Then
then we don't have to
then
do
we-
any kind of amendment.
Right. So I'm good with just referencing state and federal.
Are we,
I am too.
Yeah.
you like that?
Agreed.
Okay. And then my understanding is these changes that we're talking about today, plus the changes that we talked about last week, are all gonna come into an edited edition that we'll have sometime early next week for our next meeting. Great. So just moving on to page 19.
Actually, we're on page 19, sorry.
We good on that, suit 19?
Yeah.
What was that, there was an area you wanted to talk about a little bit in ethics.
It was, but we haven't gotten through.
So we'll put it at the end of the ethics thing, then you can present that.
I'll present it with section 4.
Okay. So we are on page 19. And the one bubble talks about relative, means a spouse or partner or civil union.
That's a statutory definition. So essentially what this would do would kind of expand that statutory definition to include a partner in a civil union.
Okay.
So are we just adding per Arizona statute, are you just adding that?
No, I think that was intended to show the difference between what is in the current definition. The current definition is broader than what the state definition is, because you've got
Okay.
stepchildren, partner in a civil union.
If we, so when we put in, we're adding that, we're making it broader than, okay. So do we want to do that? I like it. Yeah, yeah, good. Anybody else?
I think we've come across circumstances where you've had individuals who look at, okay, what is the definition of a relative in state statute, and try to find a way to skirt that. Well, we didn't get married, but we've been living together for 10 years, and we have children together, you know.
That's
So
good,
I
that's
think
fine.
trying to make it as all-inclusive as possible is a good thing to try to avoid those circumstances where, I think regardless of how you word it, you're always gonna find that one or two people are gonna try to find a way to skirt the rules and regulations. So I think on this one, the intent was to try to make it as encompassing as possible for the closest relationships that could cause undue influence.
So moving right through into that, from 19 into page 20, on the top of that, it sort of came into the same thing. It says registered with governmental agency or employee as a relationship. That was red line, we were talking about red line now, you were gonna clarify the wording or change that?
You know, I don't know if there's much that needs to be, because we're trying to be all-encompassing. For purposes of this definition, civil union means a relationship between two individuals registered with a governmental agency or employer as a relationship for employer benefits or similar legal purposes. I think that covers it.
Okay, that's fine.
Where's that line?
Top-
Oh, I see.
Top 20, yeah, that was just, that's fine.
Yeah, because if you're living together and you're claiming the other person on your health coverage, that would qualify as a relative for purposes of this
Right,
definition.
that's good.
Because that individual would have, you know, although you don't have that, you know, marriage certificate, because you're not doing the marriage certificate to try to skirt the relative rule.
So this is meant to be more specific than just referencing a state law that says relative as defined by state or something, right? So the thing that.
More inclusive of.
Right, and I like the language that talks about registered with a government agency, so that means adopted children would be registered with a government agency, even though they're not mentioned in any of these. Someone who's adopted would be registered with a government agency and would be.
Adopted child would be a child, whether adopted or natural birth.
Okay.
It's still your legal child.
Okay.
What this does is it says, for purposes of this definition, a civil union means a relationship between individuals. So it's, that last sentence is trying to better define what is classified as a civil union, because there's, you know, if you're trying to skirt the civil union requirements by not going and doing a civil union formality through the government, but you're still claiming that individual through your employer for benefit purposes. So I think that's the intent there, is to try to define civil union in a way that it can be enforced.
Any concerns on that? Anybody have anything on that?
No.
Yeah. And then,
Paul,
yeah.
so in this version, section 2 is personal interest. I just, like, they removed the original section 2 and section 3 out of here, the fraud, inclusion, and the avoidance of fraudulent contracts. So I was still thinking section 4 was personal interest, but this is where I wanted to introduce that one piece that I had worked on.
Okay, perfect.
So I just want to set the stage for this. Terry, thank you. So I think we had talked a lot of, if you'll scroll down to the ethics piece, yes. So one of the things that kept coming up was making sure that the council and everyone, we're preserving our history and our resources, and we're being good stewards. And so this was kind of my stab at trying to draft something. This is totally new verbiage. It's not anywhere like addressed in the charter, and also it kind of goes along with my fraud and collusion piece as well that I have been thinking about too. So part A was my idea of something that could be like a charge to the council and the employees and everyone to make sure that they are doing the right thing. And then the second part was, and this isn't in city code, it's my understanding, that there's nothing that talks about accepting and disclosing gifts for elected and appointed officials. So this was my stab at trying to incorporate that as well. So there you go. It's up for discussion. I just wanted to take a stab at it.
I had a chance to read it last night.
Put it
I
out
liked
there.
it. I'm curious what the legal, it was also sent to legal. I didn't hear what their comments were on any of this.
I think it's just a matter of if it's language you want to adopt, and how we work on enforcing that and maintaining it.
And that's why I wanted to just put it in there that, like, through ordinance, that way we're not like legislating through the charter how they have to just do it. They just have to, through ordinance, kind of set up a policy. There's an HR policy for city employees, but nothing for elected people at this point. So
Elected individuals are governed by state statute with regards to gifts and things.
And that's already built. That's, okay.
So it's whether you want to have that more clarified. And I'll give you an example of something under this, the way it's written, that would have to be disclosed is every Christmas, our firm sends out little gifts. They're either a Yeti cup or a thing of chocolate. You always get the Yeti cup.
I think we have them too.
Value, less than $20 value type thing. So the question is, do you want to just have it just where the council can establish that ordinance and then they can make the specific
That was
required.
Yeah.
exactly my point, so that we
Yeah.
weren't like,
So
everything,
you're not getting. over
including the
super
chocolate that's on the table, we gotta disclose that.
Meredith, is this something that you think is okay with the charter?
Sorry.
I think it's, I mean, I don't have any particular heartburn about it. And some of the, we don't really get gifts of any significance. I mean, it's really, Yeti temple.
And that's fine. But I just, again, this is kind of my nod to the tone that we're setting in our city about how we, are being good stewards of it, and how we want to have a sense of transparency and be open about everything.
Are you, okay with the state statute that, or the state, protocol with regard to gifts? Are you comfortable with that? Or do you think that it has to be, bolstered?
I think it does. I think that we, as a city, are setting the tone for how we are approaching things. And so, I think we have been very deliberate in our approach of what we include in the charter and exclude on the charter. And I think that this is something that I would like to include.
So my question is more, because as
I
far as the.
understand your question,
But hear me out for a
this
second.
is what I'm telling you.
I guess my point is, whether it's this verbiage or other verbiage, I'm of the same opinion. I would like to spell out that we expect, that there's a code of conduct we want for our council members.
Right.
I'm saying, if you have no problem with, forgive me, what is state, is it the state
State statute's broad, it's not super defined. I think this would allow for and requires that the council then, by ordinance,
Be more specific.
establish that specificity, because you do have instances, for example, when I was on the city council in Maricopa in 2005, we were being inundated with developers. Oh, let's take you to this show here, let's, come to this golf tournament here, do this, do that. So I think it's important that if that's something that you guys want to have established, and this language, I think, covers that, to require the council to at least establish the guidelines for those disclosures and things like that.
So that answers my question. What you're saying is, frankly, state statutes might not be extensive enough to achieve what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think the goal here is that you want the council to adopt something specific for the city.
So are we good with this, them adding this? They're gonna look at it, and if they feel there's some changes, it's gonna come back to us at the next pass to sit down and within the charter itself.
Yeah, the statement, the
Good.
intent of the statement, I'm great with.
Good, great.
Thank you, Suzanne, for doing
Thank you, Suzanne, that's great. Okay.
I mean, it will get to the point of them defining what de minimis is, because almost all of these policies say de minimis. And
Was there anything
some
else?
person thinks that means $100, another person thinks that means around the golf, and everybody thinks de minimis is something different, and it would be great for them to establish a policy to kind of define what that is.
Those Yeti cups are gone.
We need more than the Yeti
And that's a good reason, because if you try to put a specific amount in the charter today, in 20 and 30 years from now, you're gonna have to go through a process of amending it, because what is minimum today of, $20 or $30? You look back 30 or 40 years ago, $20 or $30 was more than the minimum back then. So that's one of the reasons why you wanna leave certain things broad, so that you're not
We don't wanna put $20 in
hamstringing
there.
yourself in the
That
future.
won't be.
Yeah, let council set it.
The bigger impact of this language really is not gonna be about gifts. Our city's basically already developed out, so there's very little economic, justification for people to come in and give big gifts to somebody on the council. Much more likely is, we'll see it the same way we've seen it in the past, of, is this something that violates personal transactional business? So you have business conflicts with something that we're deciding. That's a much more insidious problem in a small town like this, because we've got business people who do business in various ways here, and if we have them voting on things that directly impact or could indirectly directly impact their businesses, it starts getting a little bit questionable.
And that's
So
why,
this
that's why
language,
A kind of drives
quite
that
frankly,
home.
the language, the A is gonna be much more critical that we make sure the language is strong, because that's where it's come up in the past, and I'm sure it will come up in the future.
Great, good. So you guys will have a look at that, and then we'll get that back.
Thank you.
Thank you, that's great. So I think ethics, we're going good through that. There was just one other thing on the bubble, talked about regulation on lobbying, and I think that was my question. And it was, so an individual can't on their own go and just lobby about Litchfield Park.
No one represents Litchfield Park to be elected individually,
Okay,
without the authority of council saying, we are going to go do this.
You have to even register as a lobby as well, and there's annual reporting requirements for lobbying activities.
perfect. So that's built in there on that.
But it isn't quite as black and white as that, because there are multiple opportunities or occasions that happen where city council representative, normally it's the mayor, will go to the legislature with a group of other mayors or with other council members from the city, and they will talk to individual legislators about legislation that's impacting the city. So that, I suppose, is lobbying, and I don't know that as an elected official going to talk to another elected official, we have to register as a lobbyist. Because we don't. No, I don't think anybody does, Joe. So you might have an answer to that, but I don't think.
I think there's exceptions for.
Yeah, I think so that's, you have to be careful, because that does happen. And it happens regularly throughout every year, across all cities do it. And we'll set up meetings with legislators. We bring a group of legislators in, there may be a group of city council people or council people from other cities all together with a group, but you're lobbying for city positions.
But I don't think we need to change anything on that then, do we need to put that in there?
No, I think,
Yeah, don't, you don't want to restrict that.
Okay, good, yes.
Why is section 3 even necessary? I don't understand what it says. I mean,
It probably has to be in there.
for
I don't
example, I
think it
think
does.
section 3, and I give you an example of how section 3 would probably, apply. So this seems more specific as to lobbying efforts towards the city. So I, as a developer, I want to come in, I've got a project. Before that goes to a council vote, I want to schedule meetings with the council members individually and talk to them about my project and try to get them on board with what I'm doing. I'm essentially trying to lobby the council prior to a meeting to my position. So I think that would be one way that this would be applicable, so that the council prescribes by ordinances, rules and regulations on how stuff like that would happen and occur.
And actually, that would be a good idea for the council. That has been a problem. There's what we try to convince people to do, but we don't have a rule of it. We try to convince people that any individual person on the council, including the mayor, should not meet with someone who is zoning a proposal for the city without a city staffer there. So no council, even 2 or 3 council members, that no meetings happen without a staff person. And the reason for that is to avoid the appearance of something that's improper. But we don't have that rule in our policies and procedures, and we should.
So I just want to make sure that, so you're going to draft some ordinance that doesn't currently exist?
I would say we put it in our council procedures, where we
So
probably.
this says you're going to draft an ordinance.
I think the procedures should be enough.
Well, yeah, it says the council shall prescribe by ordinance rules and regulations to govern the influence.
So by ordinance, we probably have a set of council procedures.
Or you could say the council shall prescribe rules and regulations,
Yes.
and just remove the by ordinance.
Okay. It just makes me a little nervous,
Yeah.
because it says for any action the council's going to take. So you're thinking about changing the color of the posts on the lamps.
We don't want to.
Okay, so, and one of your neighbors comes over and says, I'm really against that. Well, I can't listen to you because we have this ordinance that says, so I'm just nervous, and I know you won't go that far, but there are also already state statutes where if you're taking an action on an agenda that is listed as quasi-judicial, then there are real specific rules that nobody can contact you. And when somebody calls you, say, I can't talk to you about that because it's a quasi-judicial action that we're taking, right?
Well, there may be a few instances where that would apply, but the place where this comes up is in zoning. Somebody wants a zoning change to a piece of property, and they want to come in and speak to individual council members without staff.
Okay, so the attorney can look into that, but I think that's quasi judicial, and they're not allowed to contact you.
Is that still gonna fit under this regulation and lobbying?
Oh, I know.
Kenny, is that what we're still, you're
Yeah, so I'm
suggesting
fine
we-
with this. This says
Okay,
that they're gonna
perfect.
address it, and they're gonna create a policy where you address all those issues.
So that, we'll go ahead and move through the ethics then, and we'll move on to elections, Article 10.
I think, Suzanne, you asked a question, that first bubble on B, on Section 1B, you asked a question about whether this was repeating something that was up front, and we're talking about it was being repeated, I think, in both primary and general or something, but I think the question was answered. I don't think we have any issues on that bubble, but I'm not sure.
Mike, you were really good about repeating language.
Yeah, this one wasn't one that I had, though.
Okay.
Okay. I didn't think we had.
I don't actually remember
I don't
what
remember this one.
what I said, so,
Okay.
okay.
No, it was within a special election. Was it, do we do a primary election? Is it a general election? Is it a special election? If they add this, do they have to do both a primary and a general?
Clarity between this and opening section of paragraph 1.
The opening section of paragraph 1 uses the words primary, general, or special.
And then in the bubble in Section 5, I think the words party affiliation might have been added there at our request. I still don't know what source of candidacy means. Other charters read source of the candidacy. I don't know that that means anything to our electorate when they read this. Nothing on the ballot in any election shall be indicative of the source of candidacy or of the party affiliation or support of the candidate. I don't know what source of the candidacy means. I have no idea.
Nonpartisan, basically.
But it says party affiliation right after that.
Directed, that's what it's all directed to. It's
Right.
to keep
Okay.
any influence or any suggestion that anyone's on the ballot supported by anybody, whether it's Republican Party or it's,
Okay. So as long as it says party affiliation, that, I was concerned that it didn't clarify that's what that meant, right? It has more to do with nonpartisan.
So you guys came back to that on legal. Are you saying we should add those words?
I mean, it's
Really? Okay.
just, when you run on your own. Nobody, doesn't say, Tom Show supported by the local Rotary Club.
I got you.
It's no one.
Nothing on the ballot would indicate that. I got you. Thank you.
That would be the purpose for having the source of candidacy being different from party affiliation.
And yes, that's fine. So
So
in
then
Section 6,
that's gonna be added, then you're suggesting that?
No, I think he's got it changed now, just that nothing on the ballot in any election shall be indicative of the source of the candidacy or the party affiliation or support for the candidate.
That'll go on the updated version.
That's what
That's
that is.
on
Yeah,
the
that's what's in
updated,
it.
that's what it
Okay.
says.
So then in Section 6, I think I had raised this question of, do you really want to put specific dates in there, or do you just want to say the dates established by state statute? So if they change them, we don't have to have a charter election to change these dates. I see that we still have dates in there, because those are the dates, and there's very unlikely that the state will change those.
Terry is.
And if you want to leave those, that's fine with
Yeah.
me,
Yeah, let's-
understanding that we'll have to have a charter election if the state ever changes those dates.
If you read the comment, we're going to elections to the offices of the mayor and council shall be held in even numbered years and on dates as specified by state law. Council shall specify by ordinance whether such elections shall occur in the spring or fall.
Oh, that's the language you want to.
Yes, that's what's gonna go in.
Oh, okay.
Perfect.
Okay.
That's great.
Give us the flexibility not to.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you, Terry.
That would be good.
So on the Section 7, that was just a matter of consolidating, 1A, and Chuck, I thought there was one on there you brought up about just consolidating some of the language.
It looks like that B has been shortened. Is that the original?
Yeah. No, we don't have the edited, is this, it would be redlined if it was,
Yeah.
This is the edited version.
okay, yeah, this is the
Okay.
edited version for the red line. So yes, Chuck, that was taken down.
Okay.
I think you have in section 1, it identifies the types of elections that the city will hold, and then section 7 provides for the nomination of candidates for a general election, because you can have an election for a ballot measure that it's not gonna have a primary or general, it's not gonna have a candidate, it's a ballot measure. So you establish your types of election, and then this would establish the requirements for the nomination process.
I think that's clear.
And then the only thing that, moving into A, we did talk about the tiebreaker and the clarification on that, and it's a chance, game of chance. And but that's already built in here. We don't have to put something in there on the tiebreaker.
We're using rules, right? Yeah.
Well, no, we were gonna shoot, we already wanted to shoot hoops.
I think we need to add that still.
If you want to have a specific.
Oh, yeah, whether it's flip a coin, roll a
Yeah.
dice, or something.
You want to be very specific about it, otherwise it just goes down to,
So just put it'll be a coin flip. I don't think anybody cares, as long as it's in here. You just put, ties will be
Yeah,
decided
coin
by a flip
flip.
of the coin, or something,
Perfect.
right?
Yeah, they do that in
As simple as
NFL.
it gets.
Yeah.
So that makes it.
So that makes it legal.
It's acceptable.
It's a bit like Sheila.
It's acceptable.
No, they use any sort of, yeah, we're good with through that.
Okay, good.
And then Kenny, we talked about the signage,
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I don't think
and
we-
that was supposed to go back to, that's already in the ordinances? Or what was your,
No, yeah, I asked why we would want to have any additional limitations on election signage to be added. And I said, what would you want to add? Because the Supreme Court's weighed in on this, everybody's weighed in on this, and if we just follow state statute in the court, I don't know what else you'd want to add here. And then you reminded me that some cities do say things like, election signage shall not be put up more than 30 days in advance of the election, and they must be taken down within 5 days after the election, or something like that. But that's all in code.
yeah, we left that alone.
We just, that's,
Good.
do we have sign code in the city?
Yeah.
And it talks about
Yeah,
those things. So
that
I don't know
was
that we
good.
need to put anything in
so we'll
here.
remove section 11.
Yeah.
Yeah. So moving on into Article 11. And then the big one there had to do with the municipal court, and there was a couple of languages. One, I learned at that meeting that you don't have to be an attorney to be the magistrate.
Right.
The city, yeah.
Right, not currently.
But then we were gonna have that language in there. Mike had said that we would like to have that in there, that you
Correct.
have to be an attorney.
We're going to municipal court in Article 12.
Yes.
Oh, I kind of moved through that, but those were the,
Initiative, referendum, and recall, I don't think there were any comments.
No.
yeah, initiative referendum. So Article 11 was quiet until we got to Section 5 on the presiding judicial officer. And then that had to be there was a term limit, and somebody brought up, do we want 2-year, 3-year? And it got back and forth, and I thought we decided the 2-year was just fine.
2 years is what it's been. There's
Yeah, and then there was some question of moving it to 3, but we decided 2 was good.
It's not a term limit, right? It's just a term.
I thought that was
Yeah.
the contract. And then, so moving through into that, Section 6,
We also reworded the assistant magistrate to associate magistrate.
right, that's right. So we're on page 24, Section 7. And then, maybe that was you, Chuck, that talked about the police and the city of the police. There was some language on that, whether it was clear enough or it was confusing.
Well, I think we agreed that even though we have a contracted police force, that language still covers that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we're good with that?
I think one of the questions was whether we removed and directed. The police of the city are hereby authorized to execute.
Oh, and direct.
Right, yeah.
Oh, what,
I think we want to get rid of and directed.
Yeah, my recommendation was take out and directed because, you know, if there's a circumstance where they can't do something or if there's a better process for it, this doesn't require them to do it.
Good, perfect. Moving on. So we are on Article 13, franchise and public utilities. So this is one where we're gonna say we're gonna mandate the city to buy a water company.
Yeah.
I have proposed language for that.
He's got enough land in the community for us, give us the money, we'll go get it done.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, there was really nothing in the bubble on that.
Others.
Kenny, was there anything else? Sonny?
I don't think there are any issues.
Marty, you've gone through this, did you see anything through these sections? Good. Frage? Good?
Great.
Oh, Andrew? Dr. Frazier?
I'll take, that'll work.
Yeah, we actually do, I think, well, no, we're tied, we have 3 doctors and 3 attorneys.
I don't know if that's good or bad.
And 1 CPA.
Dr. Etchart and Dr. Frazier. So we're Article 13. Looks good. Moving through section, next page, 26. We'll go into page 27, Article 16, succession in government. That was pretty clean, Kenny, I think we.
I don't think anybody had any issues.
No, I was kind of went through those pretty good. Mike was there. Good thing, yeah. So. Are you ready to show that one piece that you had on the water? Or there were a couple
Yeah,
of,
that's fine.
there were a couple of,
Are you passing definitions?
Did you have something?
I just had a formatting question. You had mentioned, you described and explained what a child or a relationship or a spouse or whatever would be. Wouldn't we add things like that under definitions instead of up in that specific section? A relative is described as, or a relative is deemed as, or...
It makes it easier if that definition is limited
In that
for that
section.
specific
Okay.
issue, to have it in that section.
Okay,
So then you don't have to say, well, it wasn't in that section, but then I have to go look at the general definitions and stuff. So the general definitions are typically things that would apply throughout the charter, and then if there was something specific to a section that you wanted to more clearly define, then have it there in that
okay.
section.
I know, we didn't have any comments on this, but that Section 8, the charter review, Mayor, I can't remember if you were here for that. And the city manager, I can't remember if you were here for that, but do we really want to review the charter every 10 years? Because it's pretty uncommon. People review general plans and things like that, but
Well, there's
things that
charter
are,
reviews that are done every 5 years.
really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
do we think we need to make it 5
most
years?
municipalities will establish a charter review board to go through and review the charter, and over, you know, since the last 5 years have issues come up, and these are specific things that are gonna be suggested for the council to recommend for a charter amendment selection and stuff like that. And I think, and this gives flexibility, it says at least every 10 years.
Shall consider.
Shall consider, yeah.
Right,
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
If we could just add language that says, and nobody that was involved in the initial charter adoption shall be included in that.
You don't have to run for election.
And Mayor, I'd just like to say, I really appreciate, or, I'm just calling Mayor. Chairman, I'd like to say, I really appreciate what you said earlier, because I was having guilt trips at night, thinking that we took votes that were like 6-5. We said, okay, well, 6 people said it was good, let's go forward. And I think we had an opportunity to negotiate some compromise that everybody would be happier with.
We've been pretty
So I
unanimous as
appreciate
a
it.
group. I do
Yeah.
think we need to go back to that. So what I'd like to do, actually, would you like to talk about the 2 lines that you had?
Yeah, it was very simple. We had talked a lot about water conservation. So in the section, the city manager section, I had the city manager, no big deal.
So the purpose is, we had talked about water, what we could do. We're limited in terms of what we can write. We can't, I tried to get them to buy water, they don't want to do it. So, anyway, these are some areas that we could put that in.
So this is my suggestion, not that I don't, trust the attorneys, but I wanted to lift some of the burden off of them. And I came up with like 3 words that I think will help, and it's in that, Word document that I sent over to the city earlier. And I think it's fairly straightforward. It says something like, the city manager will, at the top. There you go, right there. So the highlighted piece is just the part that I added. Paragraph 6 that is as it is now. And then the highlighting.
Yeah, I think
Including water conservation.
that's what we talked about
Yeah.
last time.
I mean, that's like,
What was the line what did you say, Will?
No, I'm just saying, you're adding the yellow highlighted.
Yes.
That's your
that's
addition.
my addition.
So the phrase that sticks out to me that I'm nervous about, and the city manager can comment on, is at all times. The city council shall be advised at all times.
We've already discussed that.
That
Like, I
happened?
didn't add that part.
Okay.
Only the highlighted part is where I added in the piece of
Okay.
the water conservation.
Oh, so it already says, and make reports annually worth
Yeah.
of the affairs of the city.
That was
Okay,
the
so
thing
you're
you
just-
brought up, Kenny,
okay.
you wanted to
That's-
see that.
That's what I think we all agreed was the best we could do to make sure it stays on the tip of the mind of the council. At least every year, they have to say, yeah, we're not conserving much water and we don't have much say over it, but,
At least it's there. And then I took one more stab. I know I said I was tired on Tuesday, and so I was like, let's just leave it. But when I thought about it, I was like, you know what? If I don't say anything, I'll regret it later. So this is my last stab at this. I wanted to run it by Paige as well, just to see what she thought. And so, heads up, that's going to be, we'll come back to that when she's here and can talk about the debt.
You just really cleaned up this area that we were talking about before.
This part?
Yeah. I mean, we had like,
Yeah,
it
so
was like a full
So
page.
that's gonna go into, the attorneys have that, and that'll go in with the next revised draft. We'll have these sections in there.
So that's it. I'm just looking at Article 6. It was a whole bunch of stuff that you've consolidated.
Yeah.
There was Section A, B, C,
Right.
Section 3, 4, 5. I'm just looking to make sure there's nothing missing there.
I don't think there's anything missing. In fact, I even, value, privilege, excise, and any other tax not prohibited by federal, state. So that's like anything, we can tax anything as long as they're not violating the Constitution for
Right.
any lawful municipal purpose. And then I put in there, why we would be doing it, and then I specifically addressed the sales tax and the property tax.
So the one thing that I think never fit there to begin with isn't included here, which I think is good, but has to be included somewhere based on what the attorney told us, and that is the council shall have the power to establish special taxing districts.
I think they already have.
They do, but it's not included here, and I asked why it was, because it doesn't coincide with, this is a great summation of taxation, but it also says, on top of all of those abilities to tax, they have the ability to create a special taxing district. I think they have that right without stating it. So, city attorney,
That's
do
kind
we,
of what I,
do we need to add that section that
I don't
says?
think you need to add it if it says, or you can just say, in addition to the statutory authorities of the council shall have the power to levy, collect.
I'm talking about the creation
so
of
he's
special
saying that
taxing districts.
statutorily, the council can
No,
already
the tax
create it.
districts.
If they can, they create them already,
Right.
and they don't have a charter. So something's allowing them to do it now.
There's statutory authority, that's why I'm saying,
That's all.
you could put a preparatory statement at the beginning of that and say, in addition to the statutory authority
Right.
already
Council shall
provided.
So the question is, when they want to create a community facilities district, and you're living in it, and you have to pay taxes that nobody else in the city pays because you're now in a CFD and you hate it, and you challenge their ability to do that, you're comfortable defending the city's right to create that district without putting it in the charter.
Yes, and the
Okay.
CFP.
Yes, that's fine. Yes,
Requires the
so,
vote of those living within the
Right.
district as well.
right, okay.
Great, Suzanne, did you have anything else that we're gonna?
That's all for tonight.
So those are gonna
I
go
don't know
in,
what's
and
gonna
we'll have
happen
a chance
later.
to look at those again.
I might get inspired again.
Um,
I'm gonna go home and do some more homework.
Before we,
I'm gonna drive.
Very
Thank you for
good.
taking no as a yes.
before we, I wanna talk about the, approval of the meeting schedule for next week. And now, I know last time, Sonny, I said I was hoping we could have a vote for the Tuesday, but that would be for a draft. And when we do a vote, it's gonna go to the attorneys, and they're gonna take it, and we're gonna get it done before the holidays. We are gonna reconvene after the holidays with their version back for us then to go through again, and then edit, do what we need to do, and then vote on it. So when it says further down on the, agenda, it talks about us having a vote, that's of the draft. That's not a final, so when it goes, they edit it, something comes back, we still have that chance again to make a change, okay? But I'd like to talk about meeting schedules. So I was hoping we could meet one time next week. We do have a little bit of a problem with room schedule. We could meet on Wednesday, next Wednesday, and we would shoot for a 5 o'clock meeting. We would have our edited version of everything that we've gone through for the last two meetings,
Including
including additions and including that, and then we'll make a run through that. We'll make a run through that, and there'll be any bubbles or anything that we need, and then we can go through that, and at that time, potentially, voting on the draft, we're done, goes to the city. And then we'll have a meeting sometime after the first year in January to review what they've done. Yeah,
My only
Connie?
question was, when you opened the meeting, you talked about an executive session that you had, and there was all these things that happened, and you wanted to
Do you
redo it,
wanna
and...
talk about the term limit, like?
I mean, you
Okay, I'm gonna
redo
get back to that.
stuff.
I'm gonna get back to that. No, I'm kind of, I'd like to, we only have this room till 6 o'clock.
Right.
So we're not gonna take a break.
So you're asking is Wednesday at 5, okay.
So, can we go on this agenda? I would like someone to make a motion, that we can have a meeting at Wednesday, at 5 o'clock,
It's the 13th, right?
13th,
12/13.
at 5 o'clock. Is there a motion?
I would like to make a motion that we have a
Just so you
meeting.
know,
When-
there is, you can stay after 6.
Okay,
We're just setting the start
Not a
time.
conflict.
okay, well, that's all right. We'd like to get
No, we have to be out by 5:30.
I'm not suggesting you can't get out of here.
Okay. Well, so, we have a motion on the floor to approve a meeting on
Wednesday the 13th
Is there,
At what time?
5 o'clock.
Five.
Where? Here?
It'll be at the library. Is that right? Do we have that available, Terry?
Right.
Right.
Wow.
Does somebody want to meet at 6 o'clock over there?
You're saying it's either 5 o'clock here or 6 o'clock?
5 o'clock here or 6 o'clock there?
5 o'clock here.
5 o'clock here.
All right, fine, 5 o'clock is here. So 5 o'clock, we have a motion on the floor to meet here, next 13th, 5 o'clock here. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Susan.
Susan Fix moved, seconded. Is there any further discussion?
Is this in addition to our Tuesday, Thursday?
No, there's only one meeting next week.
Only one meeting.
We can do that if you want.
Yeah,
We have to,
I'm ready to punch this thing out, so whatever it takes.
don't punch me out. So, any further discussion?
That's all the discussion.
All those in favor of having a meeting on the 13th at 5 o'clock here?
Aye.
Opposed? So pass. Okay, we're gonna go back to the, drafting of the proposed charter. There were two somewhat controversial topics. And I just wanted to bring up the one on age first. And in the original draft, there was some wording that came in legal and city, and it said you have to be 21, but then there was also wording that in order to be the mayor, you had to be 25. And then there got some discussion in there, well, what happens if the mayor's gone and the vice mayor is 22? Do we have to have that written in there? And then maybe it came up in discussion, well, why don't we just put the minimum age as 25 for all city councilmen, all mayor, everybody, and then we wouldn't have a concern. And it sort of got sideways, and we went to 21, and then we went to legal age, and we really never had a chance to get through it. My question is, why did whoever wrote this initial one, why did you guys put 21 and 25?
It came from Goodyear.
Yeah.
It's in there.
From
So
the-
that's, you just pulled that.
Other than it was in another charter, don't read into that anything, just if you guys want to have those additional requirements, you can, or you can just remove it and have it, you know, the registered voter, age 18, you know, as long as you meet all the other residency requirements and stuff like that.
So, did you say an age there? So, Paul,
We're just talking
I
age
think,
right now.
I think we, at the end, said, what is the current status? And the current status is you must be eligible to vote in the city of Litchfield Park. Not a registered voter, eligible to vote, and we all left it with, let's just leave it as is, right? That was.
No, we still had 25. We actually had a little semi-vote.
No,
We said, who wants 18? Who wants 25?
What did we say?
And then, you know, we said, okay, we're gonna do 25, 21, and 18, and then it was like, let's just do 18, 25. There was sort of a casual choice.
No,
that's not the way it went.
The final vote was, do we just want to
Yeah.
leave it as eligible to vote? And everybody, and that's what
So,
the agreement, I don't know how the vote went.
so
but that
we're
was
saying then that the mayor eligible to vote. We're allowing an 18-year-old mayor, we're allowing any city council person of any age to be at it. There's no age limit.
Let me follow up my comment with, that one and the term limits were the two that I'm feeling guilty about, because we had nice discussion, and I don't remember how the votes went, but there were a couple that were very close.
Yes, both.
And I think that's a disservice to not say, look, this is really close. Half of us think it's a good idea, half of us don't. Just because it was 7-6 or 6-5, I think we have an opportunity to negotiate some kind of something that everybody can agree to. So I don't know if this was one of those, to be honest. I think term limits
Yes.
was.
Well, it was both, but it kind of falls together, because it almost looked like, okay, 18, no term limit, just so, they didn't seem to go together. The biggest concern was, it was really the first time as a group, we didn't come as a consensus. I mean,
Right.
Somebody watching, if they have this much, we don't know kind of how we're going, how are we going to pass this thing?
Right, so you're making the same point I am, which is, if we're in disagreement, and half of us agree and half of us don't, and you feel good about winning the vote 7-6, that probably means the community's gonna be split, and there might be an opportunity to negotiate some kind of a
We didn't have
compromise.
a vote
So,
here.
so maybe, what?
He wasn't here to vote.
Right, so I think anytime we get that split, we should spend, I was tired, and a couple other people said, gosh, we've been here a long time, and I think we just wanted to get through it. And if there's an opportunity to reach a compromise, I would feel a lot better about it.
You know, one of those things, I just want to say, I know that we've probably all done this, but look at the other charters. So I went and looked at the other charters, and they say an age. They say 18, Phoenix does, Avondale says 18, Goodyear says something, which is interesting because we did go quickly, and I didn't want 18. But then I read this, and I'm fine with it now because it is 18, and looking at what other people are doing, we're not creating something brand new, and I don't think we need to be an outlier. So that made me change my mind a little bit. And I think that if we all look at the other charters and see what's going on, then we can come back and find out what would work best for our city. And the same thing goes with term limits. They all have term limits. All the other, so when you're looking at the ones I looked at, I haven't looked at every one, but read the other charters.
Well, I would
It's pretty
agree with that,
interesting.
because it was fast, it was confusing. It was out there, okay, let's have 5 4-year, you know, and I was thinking 5 4-year, 20, and
Well, let me say though.
none. So then it was like, okay, none versus 5 4-year. So we really need to be.
But that was offered as a compromise. So initially we said, we don't have any term limits now, so let's not have any term limits. That's a good point. Okay, I kind of felt for that. We're a small city. It's hard to get people to run. We shouldn't dismiss people who still want to run. That's a good argument. And then somebody said, this shouldn't be a lifelong career, and you don't want people. I like that point too. And it just kind of depended on who spoke last that influenced me. And somebody offered a compromise that said, look, the mayor made a really good point. Usually if you have term limits, it's like 2 terms is pretty standard, so that would be 8 years. We compromised and somebody said, we want term limits so that somebody isn't in there for life, but here's the compromise. Current council members are exempted, and let's make it 5 terms, so it's actually 20 years. That was a compromise. Now, if we negotiate a little more, would we get better? I don't know, but I think we voted like, should we or should we not have term limits? And the vote was like 7 to 6, no term limits. And I thought, I don't know what the vote was.
It was different, it was like 2 to 10.
I mean, if
Okay, so since you're looking at Andrew, I'm gonna admit,
Well,
I feel like I didn't give enough weight to the youngest, he described himself that night as the youngest person in the room, and I went home and thought about it and said, he said, it dissuades people from running for council when you're young if there are no term limits and you're running it against an incumbent every single time. I should have put more weight on that. I should have said, you know what, I don't have that perspective, but what he said makes a lot of sense now. I want to compromise. I don't want, you know what I mean? I want to talk about those things.
So if we look, like I said, look at the other ones, because Goodyear and, I believe it's Goodyear and, Avondale and the Phoenix are two terms.
Yeah, but Marty,
Goodyear is 3
population.
terms
Yeah,
for the different.
Those are giant populations.
No, I'm not
Let us
talking,
finish.
not what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
go ahead.
I'm saying they make some changes too. It's not established. So they have you can have 2 terms in a row in Phoenix, 2 terms in a row in Avondale, but in Goodyear, a councilman can go 3 terms.
Right.
So they're not following, they made some changes too.
Yeah.
So,
And that's a good point, so
I just want to see what other people are doing and why they're doing it. There has, a reason, so just look at them.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like
So,
to.
let me,
Another piece of information, without, telling you how you should, whether this is important or not important, this is just another piece of information. So, one of the ways things happen where you're able to do something that, you can bring something from outside state money or federal money, whatever, into the city, is you participate in these regional or statewide organizations. Maricopa Association of Governments is a good example. Also, the city of Arizona League of Cities and Towns is a good example. So, if you want to try to get into leadership within those organizations, and you're limited to 8 years total as a mayor, and you're from a small community, you almost guarantee that you cannot become you don't have enough time to get into a leadership position that's more, you might be able to make it onto the executive committee, but to get on and become a chair of MAG, for a small community, that takes more than 8 years. Unless everything lines up perfectly. And we actually work together on the west side, the mayors work together to make sure that we have mayors that are in the pipeline, that they're gonna get into these leadership spots and be able to do it quickly enough and fit in with the term limits. Because if it doesn't work out, then what happens is we don't have a west side person who is the chair of MAG when it's designated for the west side to have a chair. We lose out on the west side in terms of tremendous influence across the region with how transportation money is spent. Same thing happens at the Arizona League of Cities and Towns, except in that situation, it's even worse. Because the executive committee, once you're appointed to the executive committee, there is no term limit on the executive committee, so you can stay forever. And it's a personal appointment. So if you're on the executive committee, and now you either resign or you don't continue in the office, that seat does not go to your community. It goes to somebody else as an individual who's a mayor. So if your city doesn't continue in having influence on the executive committee at the Arizona League, and the league chairs, the positions you have to go through to become the president of the league, they're 2 years. So, and you have 3 of them. So you literally have 6 years to go through a full progression of leadership on the league. But then you got to get on the executive committee first, because you can't be a chair, you can't be in that progression until you're on the executive committee. You can't get on the executive committee very quickly, particularly if you're small. Now, if you're a big city like Phoenix, not a problem, because the league wants Phoenix mayor on the league. So the Phoenix mayor, we always put him or her on immediately. So as soon as there's a switch in the mayor of Phoenix,
they get on the lead. Same thing for the other larger cities in the state. But smaller cities, that doesn't happen. So you literally, as you write this, you need to keep in mind that whoever is gonna be, particularly the mayor, if you limit them to 2 4-year terms, it's gonna be very unlikely for them to ever get into leadership positions in some of these organizations. Now, does that make a difference in Litchfield? The only reason we have an underpass is because I was in leadership at May. 2.2 million, I think, was what we got from the federal government. We got it from scraps from here and there. We would not have had that if I hadn't been chair. We wouldn't have had it if the city manager at the time, Darrell, wasn't actively involved also in leadership positions within MAG. The first street sweeper we got, we would not have had if it wasn't for the leadership position in MAG. So there's things like that it's actually important for the mayor to go do, that you don't see, that you gotta be careful as you limit the term.
I think what you're saying supports exactly what Marty's research was, which is the bigger cities have shorter terms. As the cities become smaller, the terms seem to expand. And you did the research on this. Is that about right?
Yes.
Okay. So what we were talking about last time was exactly what people said. This is a small city. If you have a leader who's been on for a long time, we don't want to kick them off because it's hard to replace them. And when the recommendation said, look, and I can't remember who said it, said, I don't care what the term is. We just have to have some term so that this isn't a lifetime appointment because nobody can unseat the incumbent. What if it's 20 years? So all I'm saying is, I think
Incumbents have lost more than
okay,
one.
but, so all I'm saying is, that was somebody offering a compromise to all or nothing. That's all I'm saying.
Would a 4-year term allow that mayor to be able
16 years is plenty.
to get up in the MAG level and all that?
12 years is quite plenty.
And before I forget, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Will.
Before I forget, another comment that I took home with me and thought about a lot was, somebody said there should be some kind of a mentoring.
Yeah.
And we agreed we shouldn't put mentoring in the charter because that's really specific, but let me think about this. If you're the mayor and you're serving your 4th term and you only have a year left on that term, you darn well better be mentoring somebody and letting them know where you are and doing things. And I know you would do that. If you knew your term was going to expire, you wouldn't let it expire and say, good luck with the next mayor. You'd be helping the city council members who are on the council say, let me help you with the things that I've been doing so that you understand those when I leave. So I think it encourages mentoring. It doesn't discourage mentoring. That, only because somebody else brought up mentoring, and I thought it was a good point.
It is.
Okay, I thought that was a really good point, and I said all this.
Will?
So, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the only, my concern with, and I am a proponent of term limits, and I was the one that, when we were talking about this, and we were worried about shortening the duration or experience, I said, well, is 20 years, isn't that enough to get what you need to get done? Frankly, I was being a little extreme, because my point was, can't we submit a term that allows you the appropriate amount of time? Because I completely understand that core competencies of a council member or a mayor are going to be network, they're going to be experience in the job, they're going to be the relationships that you've built and the tribal knowledge that you've gained, and you build that over time, and they compound and aggregate. I understand you become better if you're truly competent. You become better the longer you've been in the seat. But I absolutely do believe 2 things. First, if you look at the demographics of this city, it's about 95% college educated. I would say that we're atypical for a small city, meaning I think that there are people out here that will involve themselves if there's a mentoring effort that takes place and takes shape. That's piece one. And then secondly, I absolutely do believe, all respect to you, Mayor, that more incumbents lose than they don't. Because I'm hearing this from friends. That length of service intimidates people. I mean, how am I possibly going to get and help or serve? And I think somewhere, as usual in all of life, somewhere in the middle, there's a solution. Is it 16 years? I'm okay with that. I really am. I understand I understand the power and the strength of longevity and experience.
So I would like to go back to one, on the one thing that has to back to the minimum age first.
Okay.
just in general, I mean, are we now okay with this?
Well, I'm just saying, when I did that research, I wasn't okay with that. I was more like at 21, but then I went around and I saw everybody else is 18, and I thought, okay, I'm not trying to reinvent the
Well,
wheel.
I don't want to show us the way this road.
No, but I wanted to see what other people are doing and what other communities are doing. So, it seemed to be the standard. But they do have an age. And then, like, they do, almost all across the board, they do have something mentoring, term limits. So I'm just talking about the form that we should fill that in and just see what other people are doing.
So are you suggesting like that those are kind of like should be tagged together if we're gonna?
Not necessarily. What I'm saying is, let's go read the stuff. Let's find out what's out there, because I changed my mind both times.
Well, the city
And,
is providing us with a checklist.
Yeah, but on everything that's
So just
I didn't see that in there.
as far as the age now, what do we have listed? It says of voting age now? Qualified age?
I think we should look at a smaller city
Like
like ours.
Casa Grande is 21.
Avondale and
So,
Phoenix are both 18.
we're not
Huge city.
at a point where, we're not, it's still a draft. I think, there's a lot of people that you've opened up a lot of eyes, and I think that vote may change. It's not a standing and how we're gonna write that right now.
Chairman,
And then, go ahead, Will.
I was simply gonna say, you got somebody that I know where.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Nobody's looking back that direction.
Sorry.
Qualified elector is language that leaves it open. And if somebody said, if you've got that dynamic, super smart 18-year-old who's really, would be great as a council member, they are a qualified elector. So it leaves it open without sending up this, we always are thinking, we've talked about this, about the possibility of this thing, are people going to look at it? And there are going to be some people who are going to see 18 and they're going to be, they're going to remember what they were like at 18, or they're going to know what their kids are like who are 18, and they're going to say no. Okay, or that'll be a no in their mind. Whereas qualified elector leaves that open, and
Yeah, but we usually those, when you go in their charters, they define qualified elector, and it says an age.
Yeah.
So that's the first layer, if they want to go find it.
Right.
One of the questions or concerns might be that there's been discussions, I don't know if it's been in Arizona, of, well, let's reduce the voting age to 16. And if you're a qualified elector, then it's now 16. Do you want to, state qualified elector and still have the age in there? Understanding that person, whether they're 18 or 21, they still have to get the majority of the vote. They
No
still
question.
have to be elected by the community.
So as far as that 18-21, that has nothing to do with tobacco, alcohol sales, or nothing in terms of, they want the mayor to be of drinking
They want
age.
to celebrate with a beer, just a bit.
they have to say.
So that's something, go ahead, Suzanne?
I have also done some reconsidering. I don't care so much about the age as I do the term limits, because in my scenario, I see a council filled with 18-year-olds who then fulfill the city manager's nightmare from his hometown of when, everyone died at the same time, and it was the same city council for 70 years. That's kind of what I'm thinking. If I know that that's not quite accurate, so that's what I'm thinking. So that's why I would rather, if I'm going to compromise, I'll give on the age, but I'd like to see term limits.
What sort of term limit are you talking about?
I think the 4x4 is fine. I have no issues with that.
I mean, you gotta be able to get done what you're looking to get done in 16 years.
I mean, I appreciate the mayor's trajectory on, important organizations that have a direct effect on our city. I don't,
Should be able to do it in 16 years.
Yeah, you can do it twice.
So.
16 years is not, 8 years is just too short.
Yes, agree.
And some of the questions on that would be is, is it gonna be specific as to 4 consecutive terms, and then you could do 4 consecutive terms, be off for a term, and then come back for 4 consecutive terms?
Well, and then the thing too, you can always go run for the
Yeah, they have
mayor,
some
too.
funny things
So,
with
like,
you can do it, but you can't do it within 12 years. There's a lot of
Because you
wiggle
could
room.
have a situation where you have an 18-year-old who runs and is on there for 4 consecutive years, and then they're off for 20 years, and then they want to run again. So the question there is, do you want to clarify that with just 4 consecutive years, or? as
4 consecutive
others have
terms.
said,
4
Terms,
consecutive
yeah.
four
Not- not
consecutive
years.
terms,
Yes,
sorry.
Yeah.
Or-
They said within a 12-year span, that's what they were talking about, or whatever.
Why
They
would,
do say things like that.
why would you,
This Chandler's is a person is not eligible to be elected to a combination of council member and mayor for more than 16 consecutive years. Theirs is the most.
Right, and it says consecutive, so then if they are off for a period of.
start at 18, they'll come back.
For a term, then it's not.
come back, throw up, school?
But are we, is that our position, is that?
No, I'm just saying, look at them and,
I think
you know,
we need to
if you look and we look,
think about
see
it.
what everybody does.
Yeah, I think we're gonna think about that, and we're gonna come back to that, and then as far as the, my question really was to the city and the mayor, I mean, was there something about 25, or, I mean, you want a 25-year-old mayor versus the?
I think it was just taken from other, and it was just, well, if you have a different age for the mayor, because the mayor's in a leadership position, do you want it to be different? Things like that.
Anybody have an age cap? There's no one 65, 75?
Well,
Actually, I think
that's
there
another
is.
question.
There
Do you want to have
No.
a
I think there is,
maximum age of
though.
80 or
I think it's
85?
So we're gonna, that's gonna go, we'll talk
I
about
think it's
that
like
at our
you
next
shall not
meeting.
elect
We'll go
anyone
through that
over
again, and then, I would like to come with a consensual, that we're all in agreement on how we're gonna put that
So
together.
that's all I want, Mayor, is
Yeah.
more people agreeing.
Yeah.
More
And
people
it's
agreeing.
good to talk
Give us all
about.
hope.
Perfect.
Let me ask you this, just because we said it would exempt existing, and then I thought about that. Then you have newly elected council members and council members who are here who can last forever, and it may be, I'm just throwing this out, that you say, existing council members will be able to serve at least one more term. So if they've been in here, it won't apply to them immediately.
Well, they
Like,
would get
we
4
passed
terms after
this,
that,
and
wouldn't
their
they?
4th term is just about to expire, and they're out. That doesn't seem fair.
No,
But they should at least
They
last.
would be grandfathered in, they would get 4 terms.
They'll be dead.
Well, I would say, so this is my question. My question is, Paul, would we just extend them one additional term? So we'd say,
I know what you're trying to say.
Oh, yeah, so,
Let me see what you're looking at. I didn't see it on.
so, okay, yes.
Table it, you mean?
That's really interesting.
Yeah, so at this point, we're not going to submit the proposed draft for legal review. We have to have that as a motion. We're not gonna do it. Does somebody want to, provide a motion that we're gonna table that
They are doing the review.
item? Is there a second? Sunny?
Second.
Will, any further discussion on that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes to table that, on submission. Just real briefly, there was a comment about how we're gonna campaign artists, this whole charter that we're putting together. I think that one we can talk about at a later date too, so that's why it's on the agenda. If somebody wants to talk about that, we can, otherwise we can table that. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. City Manager?
Mr. Chairman, one thing I would recommend, I know we were discussing this, was, once we get the draft back from the Joint City Legislature Committee, once you guys have looked at those changes, it would be a good idea to hold a public input meeting sometime in January, obviously before the publisher date, to invite the public, come in, look at the charter, look at the draft, look at what we're discussing, have questions, and maybe have input. Granted, it'll be tight between New Year's Eve and January 16th, but I think that'd be a good idea.
Yeah, I agree with that, and that's gonna be before we have done our final on it?
Yes.
So then in case somebody comes in and brings up a point,
That's correct.
okay, all right, do you guys
I
like
think it's
that?
absolutely necessary, because,
of course.
nothing on our agenda allows for public input.
Okay.
The public was here, we didn't have an agenda item to say, what do you all think? So we have to have at
Yeah,
least one meeting
we
like
will.
that.
So,
Mr. Chairman,
yes,
would you like to bring public debate to the next meeting for your consideration?
yes, that would be a great idea, and then the room, community room, or whatever we can do. So as far as that goes, that, we want to keep that on the agenda, so we just, it just stays that, right? We've already talked about it?
Table
Yeah.
it comes back to the next.
Yeah.
Oh, so we still need to table it?
Yeah.
Okay, does somebody want to, make a motion to table that agenda item for further discussion? Lisa did. Second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? And then, I do, so you're gonna bring us some dates on, that might work, great.
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye, aye, aye.
The motion passes to table that item. Great, is there a motion for adjournment?
I'll move.
Suzanne moves, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor for adjournment?
Aye.
Opposed? The passes, we adjourn.
So one meeting Wednesday for like 10